Chapter 1828, A Dream of Chaos. Save Me. Morana was in a difficult situation. She knew only too well the terrifying power of those daggers. The red energy crystals exploded in a small area, producing power comparable to the Reaper of Love. The most powerful move of the demon god's body is to burn it to overload its functions. And there were thousands of such weapons. They circled and danced in the air like deadly vipers, attacking her from all directions. Morana's face was cold and terrifying. She opened her hands, and a strong chill enveloped her surroundings, forming a huge barrier around her body to block the dagger's invasion. Platos saw this and slowly raised his right hand from afar, his fingers dancing nimbly like a conductor's baton. Clang! Clang! The daggers moved closer and closer to her body. Explode! As soon as Platos finished speaking, the dagger closest to Morana suddenly began to flash, the self-destruct mechanism was activated, and the red energy body embedded in it, which was about the thickness of a finger, suddenly changed from dark red to bright red, and finally to a pale white. Its energy was quickly activated, and then passed through the detonator on the dagger, causing this power to instantly explode in the direction the dagger was pointing, the direction Morana was in. Morana felt the power of that might, but at the moment, all areas around her were blocked off, and her only choice was to use all her strength to defend against the imminent attack. Rumble! A violent explosion occurred in the area, and the sound of the explosion was fleeting. The commanders in Samaran City could only use satellites to see from a high-altitude perspective a huge red energy body erupting. There was no sound because the scene was completely in a vacuum. The energy level was comparable to the eruption of a small to medium-sized Reaper of Love. Buzz, buzz. The screen quickly flashed, and then it completely turned into snow. And in the entire command center, the images on multiple monitors disappeared one after the other, and nothing could be seen on the battlefield. The staff hurriedly threw down their headphones to prevent the sound of the strong current from piercing their eardrums. A female officer turned her head and reported to the three Prodajas, due to strong signal interference, all monitoring equipment on site can no longer continue to work. Prodaja hurriedly asked, "What about the satellite? Is the satellite working normally?" It's difficult to observe the scene with spy satellites. But the KQ-1 is in working order and can be launched as long as the correct coordinates are given. After all, the KQ-1 is a device that exists as a trump card weapon and will not be easily interfered with. But for the time being, unable to observe everything that is happening on the scene, the KQ-1 has become blind. Apart from Morana, who can use it, it is difficult for others to achieve precise strikes on the ground from a distance. How could this happen? Will the mutants in the Pantheon be okay? A male officer muttered in a low voice with a pale face. The most powerful army, and it is still a situation where they have the advantage of fighting on their home soil, but they are still fighting so hard. And judging from the situation before the screen disappeared, the Pantheon is even in a very dangerous state. The second demon god of the 10 demon gods, Yi, is unexpectedly so difficult to deal with, which is beyond their imagination. We made a mistake, we made a mistake. Prodaja muttered, his eyes no longer calm as before, his pupils vibrating violently, clearly in a state of confusion. Their judgment of the strength of the 10 demon gods could only be based on the intelligence obtained on the battlefield. In their view, the 10 demon gods were all battle-type mechanical life forms from mechanical civilization, and even if there were differences in strength, they could be roughly judged. Using the intelligence gathered from the battles of teams like Zhang Yi and King Arthur, they believed they were fully prepared for this battle. If the opponents were at the level of Demon God Bing and Demon God Ding, then with Morana's strength, they would definitely be able to win. And the victory would definitely be even easier than that of King Arthur and Zhang Yi. But he didn't expect that the strength of Demon God Yi was so terrifying. Yi and Bing were on a completely different level. Prodaja had forgotten. The 10 demon gods and the rankings are just names that humans have given them to make it easier to identify them. But sometimes, humans can be easily deceived. The 10 demon gods have never been the top fighting force of mechanical civilization. There were many lower-level demon god mecha in the past of mechanical civilization. Demon god Jia was also known as Loridek, and demon god Yi, who also had a native name, Platos, are special. It can even be said that they are completely different from other demon god mecha. On the battlefield, Platos watched the violent explosions from afar. "I don't think I'll die so easily," he said indifferently. Suddenly, a crisp sound came from him. Crack! A crack appeared on his face, and several small pieces of metal fell from the air, revealing half of a snow-white face. It resembled a human face in some ways, but it was incredibly handsome and charming. "Huh!" He touched the gap on his face, quite surprised. "It is indeed somewhat interesting," he muttered to himself. At the center of the explosion, after the energy wave gradually dissipated, a terrifying ice and snowstorm surged out of the red light, as if an endless white wave of snow were surging up from the deep sea. This ice and snowstorm soared thousands of meters into the sky, and then headed straight for Platos. Amidst the ice and snow, Mirana's face also appeared. Within the ice and snowstorm, the tough ice turned into sharp swords, shooting towards Platos. Plato's eyes revealed a trace of amusement, and then he extended his right hand forward. He simply pushed his right hand forward, then clenched his hand in midair, as if something had been severely compressed by the air, and an invisible shockwave crashed forward fiercely. Boom! The forward momentum of the ice and snowstorm, which was comparable to a tsunami, was directly and severely suppressed, and then it was suddenly and violently crushed from the middle. A huge wall of ice rose up in front of Mirana's body, each wall of ice like an iceberg. However, under Platos's blow, these walls of ice were unable to hold back the attack for long, and they shattered one after the other. Even before, when she was surrounded by thousands of daggers and attacked by that powerful and terrifying force, Mirana's face did not show any signs of surprise. But at this moment, a look of shock finally appeared on her face. Platos did not use any super-arrow weapons, but simply used his supernatural powers to easily defeat her counterattack. Everything was under control. Platos's ability was to be able to control everything within his field of vision. It was not simply controlling objects, but compressing air to form a shockwave that could instantly attack everything around it. Moreover, this attack did not have any signs, and there was no attack trajectory to speak of. The ability is very simple. For a being of his level, combined with the powerful technology of mechanical civilization, there is no need for a complicated ability. One only needs to be powerful enough in and of itself. Thor and Luna had sensed that something was amiss in the battle, but at the moment, the two of them had no time to lend support. Because at this moment, they had just realized that the strength of this strange guy next to Demon God Yi was actually above that of the lower-ranking demon gods. Karagher is the younger brother of Platos. Although he is not as talented as his brother, he can use the most advanced technology of mechanical civilization and a powerful energy crystal to create a core that can give even the most useless person top-level combat power. Thor and Luna's attacks are having a hard time even breaking his defenses. Karagher watched them like two interesting toys. His attack movements were extremely skilled, and the combat chip implanted in the source made his mechanical body as flexible as a powerful martial artist, able to respond to various attacks. His fists and feet were fierce, his body was agile, and there he happily struck fighting poses one after the other, as if it were a game to him. Mirana was at a disadvantage in her battle with Platos. Absolute Zero is an extremely powerful ability, but she is not an enhancement-type mutant herself, so her defense cannot be considered strong. The battle armor formed from ice can barely eliminate some of the attacks, but the strength of the flesh is there for all to see. After just a few rounds of combat, her internal organs had already begun to malfunction, and blood was oozing from the corners of her mouth. The combat suit injected her with stimulants and healing drugs, allowing her to temporarily relieve the pain and not let it affect her battle. But the next step, how to win this battle, was a huge problem for her. Therefore, when she was near Platos, although she was able to block any movement of Plato's body, she was also unable to withstand Plato's telekinesis attacks. Platos slowly hovered in midair, with thousands of sharp daggers behind him, which could be combined into various forms at will with his will. His formidable technological prowess, combined with his top-level psychic abilities, left him with few weaknesses. Morana took a deep breath and, after sensing through the smart system, was still able to communicate with the skyscraper above. This gave her a slight sense of relief. But the next moment, the daggers behind Platos quickly danced in the air, transforming into a pair of huge wings behind him. Whoosh! 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 The feathers of the black wings fell off and shot towards her. Morana swung her arm, and an endless storm of frost surged up around her, a terrible hurricane spreading outwards with huge, heavy sheets of ice. The huge tornado reached up to the sky, growing larger and larger in area, as if it could destroy a city. The storm twisted the dark clouds in the sky together, and there was the sound of thunder. And this posture was just to defend against daggers carrying the power of a small to medium-sized reaper of love. Plato saw the magnificent frost storm before him and simply raised his two arms. His hands were held straight out, together, and then slowly, as if opening doors, spread out to the sides. His telekinesis invaded the immense wall of the storm. The howling hurricane, the terrifying storm, the tornado that seemed to want to destroy the entire ice plain, was actually torn open from the middle. Morana's figure once again appeared before Platos' eyes. Morana seemed to see the coldness in his eyes. There was no anger, no murderous intent, as if he were removing a nail from a wooden board. The command center in the city of Samarin was in a complete mess. The signal from the front line had completely disappeared. After all, Morana and Plato's war could affect anything within 100 miles. Who would dare to spy on these two guys, who could be described as the reapers of love in human form, from up close? However, the scenes that had disappeared before their eyes had already made the three of them feel that something was amiss. Their confidence was completely lost. Prodaja paced back and forth anxiously, arms crossed, his eyebrows knotted in a frown. No, we can't go on like this. The current situation is critical, and we can't afford to lose this battle. Before, they hadn't seen other countries fail to win here, but the consequences were not as clear when you're just watching. The Roman and Kermit kingdoms, both of which had sent teams of mutants to fight, had suffered total losses. This meant that in the near future, these two countries would inevitably be annexed by other powerful forces in the surrounding area. Countries without top-level mutants were extremely vulnerable in these times of great change. Similarly, if the three leaders, who symbolized the supreme combat power of the Pantheon, were defeated or even killed in battle, Fremons would be completely eliminated from the international front ranks from now on. The world is a cruel place, and the weak have no right to speak. What's the point of rushing around? We have to think of something quickly. Aliyev, with his large crew cut, was smoking a pipe, oblivious to the fact that it had already been smoked. Call for help, ask the mutant teams in other countries for support. This was currently the only way to solve the problem. Otherwise, all other measures would be useless. The Reaper of Love could not be used either. Once fired, that weapon would be detected by every country on the planet, not to mention mechanical civilization. Yes, we need to ask for help from the mutant teams in other countries, Vladimir also said approvingly. The several people spoke at a rapid pace, not even willing to make any pauses. Prodaja immediately said, right now, the troops of all countries are on missions, and they can't even solve their own problems. Who can help us? Aliyev walked over and grabbed Prodaja by the shoulders. You know who to go to. The only one who can get there in time is Chaos from the Washu Kingdom. Upon hearing this name, Prodaja's face became even more unpleasant. You want me to go to that guy? He's a ruthless character who eats people and spits out their bones. The three leaders were all intelligent people, and in an emergency, they knew who to turn to for help. But Prodaja was reluctant to go to Zhang Yi. Their relationship had not been a happy one. The last time something happened to Jussenberg, he had already humbled himself and begged Zhang Yi for help, only to end up investing a large amount of resources. This had always made him very angry. If Zhang Yi was asked to help again, the cost would be immense. It could even cause Fremons to suffer heavy losses. Aliev stared him in the eye. So what do you suggest? Just stand by and watch our strongest mutant unit die? No, that's not what I meant. I just don't want to go to that guy. Prodaja argued. He thought for a moment and said, 3 mutant units have already returned from their missions, so there's no need to go to Chaos. Vladimir's eyes lit up. The Knights of the Round Table from Britannia have already returned. It is said that they independently conquered an undersea civilization, and now the strength of the entire team is unfathomable. From the information we have at the moment, they should be the strongest among all the teams that have come this time. It is indeed possible to ask them to help. Prodaja also hurriedly said, yes, Chaos is not as strong as Morana. He is only good at defense and escape, and even if you let his people go, it may not have any effect. I think it is best to contact King Arthur. As soon as he finished speaking, he directly began to contact King Arthur. A few seconds later, King Arthur's voice came through the communication device. His voice was low and a little tired from the battle. Hello, Mr. Prodaja, what is it? Prodaja quickly told him what had happened. Your Majesty King Arthur. We really need your help now. The strength of the demon god Yi has exceeded our expectations. The Pantheon team is facing a lot of resistance. But if you are willing to help, you can definitely solve this crisis. After the job is done, we are willing to share half of the resources from this battle with you. Time is of the essence, and Prodaja, unlike in the past, did not beat around the bush and directly offered very attractive conditions. After hearing this, King Arthur's eyes revealed a look of regret. I'm sorry, Mr. Prodaja. After the previous battle, the condition of my subordinates and I have not yet recovered. If we are to be thrown into a second, even more complicated battle at short notice, I don't think we can accept it in our current state. In that battle, he had fought the demon god Bing alone. If he had chosen to join forces with Merlin, they would have been able to win more easily. However, as the King of Knights, he was always influenced by chivalry, and perhaps he also wanted to compete with Zhang Yi, so he stubbornly insisted on fighting the demon god Bing one-on-one. As a result, at this time, his body was very weak, and his combat effectiveness was less than 70% of his peak. In this state, if he were to face the demon god Yi, whose strength was obviously much greater than the other demon gods, it would be tantamount to seeking death. Moreover, from Prodaja's words, it can be deduced that it is still unknown how Morana and the others are doing on the battlefield. If they rush over there, and everyone in the Pantheon is killed, won't they also become Yi's meal? King Arthur did not think about it for long, and directly rejected Prodaja. Prodaja's heart sank. He knew that he could not convince King Arthur. After all, no one would die for such a small benefit. However, there was no time to delay. After thinking for a moment, he immediately contacted Emperor Indra of the Brahma team. Although the fighting power of the Brahma team was weaker than that of the Knights of the Round Table, it still had 1 bishop-level mutant and 2 chariot-level mutants. As long as they joined in, they would definitely increase the chances of the Pantheon winning. When Emperor Indra received Prodaja's request, he was in a very bad state. His battle with demon god Gung had taken a toll on him, and he was still being treated with numerous tubes inserted into his body. And this time, coming to Fremons had resulted in the death of the Azura, which was a heavy blow to the entire Brahma. Now he could only hope that what he had brought back from the battlefield could make up for their losses. Prodaja's request left him speechless. But upon thinking about it, a sense of satisfaction arose in his heart. Although they had won a crushing victory, just look at Fremons. They couldn't even defeat the Mechanical Legion on their own and had to come begging for help. As expected, Brahma was the most powerful country in the world. Fremons was nothing but a paper tiger. That being said, Emperor Indra still refused Prodaja. He briefly explained the situation in Brahma, and Prodaja was left speechless. A black chariot-level mutant died in battle, and Emperor Indra himself was injured. How could you force someone to go to war? The Knights of the Round Table and the 8 tribes are unwilling to go and support them. Prodaja's voice trembled with panic and anger. But more than anything, it was fear. Without support from the outside, it was likely that the mutants of the Pantheon would die on that battlefield. Fremons would then be completely reduced to a second-rate force in the future. Prodaja. There's still chaos. Go find him and beg him for help. Aliev grabbed Prodaja by the collar and roared, his normally well-groomed hair disheveled by his overzealous actions. At this moment, he didn't care about his appearance. Prodaja gritted his teeth and said, "The Knights of the Round Table and the 8 tribes refused to help because they themselves had just finished a major battle and were unable to go and support us. Do you think the mutant troops from the Huashu Kingdom are any better? Not to mention that Chaos is a crafty fellow in his own right. Just looking at their current state, I'm afraid they won't be able to sustain another battle." Aliev roared, "Go and try. How will you know if you don't try? If Morana and the others are finished, we're all finished. Do you understand?" He spat in Prodaja's face, and Prodaja clenched his fists before finally shaking his head in resignation. "It's no use, Aliev. All we can do now is pray." He didn't really think that Zhang Yi's arrival would have a significant impact on the battle. Because he never felt that Zhang Yi was a strong person like King Arthur or Morana. In his eyes, Zhang Yi was a petty person who was calculating, without a big picture or too strong a strength. He would only huddle behind his own dimensional gate. While Aliev and Prodaja were arguing, Vladimir, the other member of the Big Three, walked up to them and reached out to separate them. "Wait. You should take a look at this first."